This was actually a very interesting video, and I thought the guy made great points for Russia, but at the end of the day, if this goes down, I think it's not close. I'm Team America, baby. You know what? Leave a like if you guys think America could defeat Russia on its own. Could the US defeat Russia on its own? My friends, this is a great question. We are talking about two of the most powerful countries in the world, even though I think America is quite stronger, but we shall see. Before I go into that, let me ask you for one thing. If you can leave a like, thank you so much. It's the best way to show support. Now, if you can subscribe, well, in that case, forget about it. You make my day. Have that in consideration. Link for the original video in my description, and let's play it.
The United States would absolutely decimate Russia if war broke.
And we can end the video here. Thank you so much for watching. The answer is yes. What? So we start with a spoiler? America would destroy completely Russia? Oh man, okay, let's start from the beginning, sorry. Spoilers.
The United States would absolutely decimate Russia if war broke out between the two nations. That's the opinion of David Petraeus, a former CIA director and 4-star army general who says that Russia launching an
director of the CIA. So this guy knows what he's talking about.
Nuke in Ukraine would lead to the US stomping Putin into submission. But there's a caveat to that claim. Petraeus says that the US would lead NATO in a collective takedown of every conventional Russian force, from battlefield equipment to naval, that is stationed in or around Ukraine. What he doesn't say is that if it was a one-on-one fight between Russia and the US, with all of their individual forces focused solely on each other, that America would come out on top. Would it though? That's an interesting question, as the world...
Wait, but there is doubts about that? Oh man, this video became more interesting right now.
World's two largest superpowers colliding would inevitably...
By the way, I have to make a disclaimer here. Actually, a bunch of them. One, I'm not Russian. I know this may surprise a couple of you guys. I still got messages in a daily basis people asking me how Russia is doing. I'm not Russian, I'm actually Portuguese, so I want to make this clear. Second, man, I've been saying this for so long. Second, I try to play devil advocate here. So, you know what I mean? Of course I'm Team America, baby, but I want to make this a bit spicy. Let's see it.
Inevitably lead to a world war that involves almost every ally that either country could muster. But if we could create a hypothetical battlefield in which the two countries fight alone, would the US have what it takes to defeat Russia? Or does Putin have enough tricks up his sleeve to take on America? Let's find out, starting with the most obvious point, the size of each country's military. According to global firepower...
Oh, here I think Russia is actually bigger, right? In terms of men. Not in terms of weapons and stuff like that, but in terms of men, I think they have more.
The US and Russia rank as numbers 1 and 2 respectively in terms of the sheer size of their militaries.
Oh, wow.
Starting with the United States, it has 1.832 million military personnel, 1.39 million of whom are on active duty and not part of volatile paramilitary groups. The vast majority of that military is focused on the ground-based army, which boasts a little over 1 million members spread across active and reserve duty. But the Air Force and US...
Man, 1 million members, that's like 10% of my country population. How crazy is that?
US Navy are no slouches, with both having hundreds of thousands of members. The US also has a ton of equipment. A staggering 13,300 aircraft, with 9,975 of those being combat ready, join 5,500 tanks and over 300,000 vehicles, along with impressive stocks of artillery. On the naval side, the US has 484 assets, including...
And sorry, I do a lot of pauses in this type of videos because I really love them. But the thing is, these numbers, I actually, before we see the Russian numbers, I believe they could be similar to this. But even if they are similar, in terms of technology, you know what I mean? America jets are much better. American Navy is much better, you know. So this is not a fair comparison if we just go by numbers.
Nearly a dozen aircraft carriers.
Leave a like if you agree with this.
And 92 destroyers. It has nuclear-capable submarines too, making its naval fleet a terrifying force, both on the surface and below it. These are amazing numbers, but Russia isn't too far behind. Global Firepower points out that it has 1.33 million military personnel, with 830,900 of those on active duty. That leaves 250,000 as reserves, and a similar number in paramilitary groups, such as the infamous Wagner Group, that Moscow essentially controls. In the air, Russia does seem to fall behind substantially. It has 4,182 aircraft, of which Global Firepower estimates around 2,000 are combat ready, and the Russian Air Space Force, VKS, has a few 100,000 fewer members. Russia also has less military vehicles, 151,000 to America's 300,000, though it comes out
wow, that's a huge difference.
On top with tanks, as it has more than double what the US boasts. Its navy is bigger too. Russia has 598 assets that it can call on, though the spread of those assets differs from the United States. It only has one aircraft carrier, for instance, and a comparatively paltry 15 destroyers compared to America's 92.
Oh, but they need the aircraft carriers. America is so ahead when it comes to this.
Submarine numbers are about level, though America wins out for nuclear capabilities. But Russia has impressive numbers of corvettes, and is likely more capable than the US when it comes to conducting mine warfare. If war were won on pure numbers alone, the US would be the clear victor. It has more of almost everything from personnel to equipment, and even in the naval area, where it lags behind, you could argue that America's focus on more attacking vessels gives it an advantage. But
okay. So this is actually, America is a bit ahead right now, right? Let's make the point of let's, see the situation we are in right now. By the way, if you like this type of videos, leave me a like, my friends, because I've been reacting to more military stuff and I have a blast. André, do you know what you're talking about? No idea. Yeah, no idea. I'm making things on the fly, but I'm learning. Okay, so we are a bit ahead. We are, like I'm American, but we are a bit ahead. But we have to have in consideration one thing. You guys told me this a bunch of times. The country that invades struggles much more than the country that defends. And in this case, America has to invade Russia. And that's probably really, really difficult. Can we agree with that? So this could be tricky, actually.
But sheer numbers alone don't win wars. Both the US and Russia can tell you that. They have each found it difficult to win wars against much smaller countries, as we saw clearly in Vietnam and are currently seeing in Ukraine. So pure military might isn't the measuring stick for a conflict between the two. We have to dig deeper. Starting with the ground game, both have similar ground force setups. For the US, its infantry squads form the backbone of its armed forces, with its light infantry being divided into air assault, mountain, and airborne units. Each light infantry squad consists of 9 soldiers, divided into a squad leader and a pair of fire teams. Each of those fire teams has a lead, an automatic rifleman, typically carrying M4 carbines and an M249 automatic weapon, a grenadier, and a rifleman. Soldiers may also receive AT-4 anti-tank weapons if the situation calls for it. Mechanize one of those infantry units and you see the addition of both the Stryker and M2 Bradley fighting vehicles. Most interesting here is the new generation of Strykers, which come equipped with either a powerful 30mm cannon or the United States' ace in the hole, the Javelin anti-tank missile. That missile gives the US a mid-range option for taking out tanks that could prove especially useful given Russia's reliance on them as combat vehicles. Russia's equivalent of America's mechanized squads is its motor rifle team, which will typically come equipped with either a BMP-23 or BTR-82A combat vehicle. Those vehicles have 7-man dismount teams, all armed with a pair of PKM machine guns, an AK-74M rifle, and a short-range RPG-16 anti-tank weapon. Those PKMs are starting to get a little dated, though Russia is in the process of switching them out for the updated PKP. However, the
So this is interesting that they are talking about updated weapons and stuff like that, because I was watching the news and seems like Russia economy right now is in war mode. I actually think that's good for them in the sense that if there is an escalation against America, if the economy is already in full war mode, would you guys agree that that's kind of good? That they are probably making new weapons, they are focusing more in new technology. I don't know. I think that could be a positive thing if that makes sense. Of course, war is bad, right, my friends? But
motor rifle teams lack a comparable anti-tank weapon to the Javelin. giving the US a slight advantage in that area that would otherwise be more or less equal. However, Russia does come out on top in terms of the sheer number of infantry it can field compared to the United States.
Okay.
Its infantry contains a trio of vehicle platoons, including an extremely mobile airborne unit that enables it to field about 25% more soldiers than the US Army, according to the national interest. Theoretically, that gives Russia more tactical mobility on the ground, especially compared to America's light infantry that is marching on foot. Russia can reach objectives faster and deploy more people when it gets there. But that increased deployment isn't all it's cracked up to be. When Russia loses one of its vehicles, it loses about a third of its combat power that's built into each of its squads. By contrast, the US loses about a quarter because it has so many infantry members already on the ground. Combine that with the Bradley's better armor and superior firepower compared to Russia's BMP, and you have another slight edge for the US. Throw the Javelin into the mix.
What the hell? Look at that. That's crazy.
And the US has more than enough firepower to take on Russia's superior deployment capability.
Oh my god, sorry, I will run back. I get distracted a bit easy. My friends, I think my shoulder is gone if I shoot this. You know what I mean? No?
Mix. And the US has more than enough firepower to take on Russia's superior deployment capabilities. Of course, there are caveats on both sides. The first is that neither country's infantry would fight alone. The battle wouldn't be a case of stacking infantry units against one another. Mortars, air support, artillery, and so much more would be added to the mix, meaning that ground-based battles would be determined as much by tactical nous as pure firepower. Terrain is the second caveat, with Russia's effectiveness potentially being curtailed if battles were fought on terrain that favors foot soldiers, given its heavy reliance on vehicles. However, you could also argue that Russia would have the advantage if ground battles were fought in colder climates. And of course, each would have a home field advantage of knowing their territory if the war encroached into their own country. So there are factors at play beyond firepower. Though the US likely comes out on top in a ground war, it's better equipped and has more infantry, even if Russia has superior deployment. We see a similar story when the battle takes to the skies. Here, the US has...
He's about to say, here America is so much ahead. My friends, we are what? 12 minutes in, no one is watching right now. Most people leave after 5 minutes of the video. But for the ones that are watching, I'm gonna confess one thing. Since I've been reacting to more military stuff, at this point I'm too old. But now I kinda miss not going to the military here, you know? I know this may sound crazy, but honestly seems like a lot don't, you know, I know that this is a very serious thing, but seems fun at the same time. If you really enjoy this type of stuff, I think you make great friendships and I also great friends. And I also think like you can learn really amazing skills. I know I have a lot of vets watching me. Do you guys miss the military, my friends? Because I never went and looking at this, I kind of regret, you know.
It's a clear advantage.
Maybe just 1 year or two, because here we have that option. But man, I don't know. Sorry, so let's run back.
Story when the battle takes to the skies. Here, the US has a clear advantage for the simple fact that each country uses its air force differently. Russia tends to focus on small-scale operations with its air force. It typically uses its planes to offer support to its ground troops, with bombing runs tending to be conducted at low altitudes. That approach creates a great risk of planes being shot down by anti-air artillery, as we've seen to great effect in the Ukraine war. According to the RAND Corporation, Moscow has lost between 84 and 130 of its aircraft by August 2023, with the real number...
Oh boy, that's not looking good for Mother Russia. Joking, I'm not Russian.
likely being higher. In fact, the same group says that Russia may have lost between 27 and 57 aircraft by simply pushing too many of its aging aircraft into longer service. Maintenance is almost as much of an issue as the caliber of its pilots and the approach it takes to aerial battles. By contrast, the United States focuses on composite air operations, or COMAOs. This approach can bring anywhere between 20 and 100 aircraft into a single operation, usually taking place over a large geographical area to achieve an objective. Those craft will vary, with some providing reconnaissance and support, while others attack more directly, creating a multifaceted approach to air-based warfare that allows the US to not only cover large patches of land, but also fend off other aerial forces. Granted, Comeos often include aircraft from multiple countries working together to achieve a goal, but it's likely that the US would still employ this approach when fighting Russia on its own, especially given the sheer volume of superior equipment that it has. And equipment is another major win for the US. Russia.
Okay, I believe I know the most powerful planes, jets that America have. F-22 Raptor, good luck fighting that. F-35, probably one of the best ones still. A-10 Warthog, probably still one of the best ones. Would you guys agree with me? F-25, F-35, A-10. Let's go with those three. A-10 Warthog, F-35, and F-22 Raptor, right? F-22 Raptor. Those three are amazing.
Russia has a large number of Soviet-era aircraft, including its MiG-29s, MiG-31s, and Su-27s.
Yeah, the A-10 Warthog alone destroy all of those.
It also uses Su-30s, which were introduced in 1992, making them over 30 years old. Granted, these craft have generally been modernized as much as possible, making them capable of modern air-based warfare, but they're still old aircraft, with a lot of flight miles recorded and relatively few left in the tank. Of course, these aren't the only craft in Russia's lineup, as they also have the more modern MiG-35 and Su-35 fighters to call on, but neither is as advanced as America's best fighters, and Russia's war in Ukraine has shown that it's increasingly reliant.
Tell us the best jets, man. Come on, I love to see the best jets of America.
On older craft to conduct its air operations. In comparison, the US largely uses the F-16 and A-10 fighter jets, which have been in
A-10? Is the A-10 Warthog? A-10 fighter jets.
Operation for about 20 years.
But the F-16 is not even that good anymore. Right? I think you guys have much better. Wait, sorry, let's run this one back.
On older craft to conduct its air operations. In comparison, the US largely uses the F-16 and A-10 fighter jets, which have been in operation for about 20 years. They're starting to show their age too, though they don't have as many miles on the clock as Russia's older stock of Soviet-era fighters. However, it's in the process of introducing the F-35A Lightning II into its fleet, a fifth-generation fighter jet. The F-35A would likely be the trump card that America could deploy in an air battle that it should already dominate, simply thanks to its superior tactics. So the
this guy makes great videos, but he's not talking about the F-22 Raptor because, the F-22 Raptor should be here.
Battle on the ground is fairly even, but the battle in the skies should be in favor of the United States. That was even pointed out in
Sorry, but for real, why not the F-20? The F-22 is better than the F-16?
2020 by a Russian tech billionaire named Mikhail Bolshakov. In an article published on the Russian news website Vzgliad, he pointed out that Russia does have the Su-57, which it claims is superior to anything that America has to offer, but where production of the Su-57 is faltering at best, America already has 500 F-35s, compared to the tiny squadron of more modern fighters that Russia has at its disposal. There's no use in saying that something is better if that something barely exists. For the United States, it could assume that Russia would deploy similar air tactics to those in Ukraine, and those tactics would represent opportunities given the wealth of anti-aircraft options that the US has compared to the...
No, great points made here. Basically, they are saying, we have a much better jet. It's basically me saying, my Audi is better than yours. It's just not built, but in the future.
The soldiers on the ground in Kyiv. The US is looking pretty good so far, but the battle may start to turn in Russia's favor once the Navy comes into play. After all, Global Firepower's figures from earlier show that Russia's Navy is larger than America's. Though the US is no slouch, yes, it has fewer naval assets, but those assets tend toward being more combat-focused than those deployed by the Russians. Still, you can't underestimate Russia's capabilities in this area. Yes, its Navy focuses primarily on smaller patrol boats and corvettes, neither of which present much of a threat to America in a blue water scenario. The deeper you go into the sea, the more America has the advantage.
Wait, my friends, do you guys think... Wait, my friends, I have a tremendous idea. To help America, you guys should send this video to the security of America or something. Why not put a lot of bases in Alaska? That way you guys are ready. You know what I mean? Because you guys are right there. And they are still far away. I'm losing focus. Let's continue.
some of its large ships and submarines to distract America's bigger combat vessels in deep water, it could deploy its smaller vessels to coastal regions. That would be a problem. Corvettes and patrol vehicles are capable of attacking ports and launching smaller attacks, especially once they've drawn in close to a target. They're also more agile than the larger destroyers, meaning they'd present a clear threat to commercial vessels that aren't equipped to fend off attacks from any type of ship. And though the Pacific Ocean...
You know what? I think I understood this video wrong at the beginning. I thought this was America trying to invade Russia. But here is Russia attacking America. Oh, this is crazy. They have no chance at all. No chance. No chance. No. I thought it was the opposite. That I thought was quite more difficult.
Once they've drawn in close to a target, they're also more agile than the larger destroyers, meaning they'd present a clear threat to attacking ports and...
I took out the glasses because I was losing focus and I think this distracts my eyes. Never mind.
Launching smaller attacks, especially once they've drawn in close to a target. They're also more agile than the larger destroyers, meaning they'd present a clear threat to commercial vessels that aren't equipped to fend off attacks from any type of ship.
Okay.
And though the Pacific Ocean would be a huge barrier to these small ships, Russia's proximity to Alaska, its Providenia port is just 250 miles away, could prove a route in. Attack Alaska, establish it as a naval base, and launch from there. Of course, the US would have something to say about this approach. While that proximity is an issue,
so Alaska can also be a problem. That's why you guys should have, already crazy stuff there.
It would also create a bottleneck if Russia relied on it alone to get its ship closer to the United States. Its smaller vessels would be sitting ducks for America's fleet of destroyers as they cross the Bering Strait. So that would be unlikely to happen. And according to Marine Insight, there's a good reason why. As with its air force, Russia takes a different approach to the United States with its naval forces. Russia is all about strategic deterrence. It uses its navy primarily to keep others away from Russian territory rather than to actively attack in deeper seas. That's not to say it's incapable of blue water combat. It's just not as capable as the US, which would make using its navy to prevent America from landing in Russia via sea a smarter strategy. The United States, by contrast, relies on power projection and is much more likely to deploy its navy into deep waters to combat Russia. It could also...
I mean, they do this all the time. You guys are all over the world, so...
So use its fleet as launching points for the Air Force's Comeo attacks. Get one of its dozen or so aircraft carriers in close, and American fighter pilots could take to the skies to attack Russian ports or even conduct simple reconnaissance. The only area where the two countries are approximately equal is in nuclear-powered submarine capabilities, and it's here that Russia could claw back some ground. According to Newsweek, Putin has been improving Russia's underwater capabilities for years, with the crown...
My friends, but this is very important, right? Submarines play a huge role, specific if two major countries go, to war. This is actually interesting that they are... Maybe America should invest more in submarines.
Jewels of that fleet being the Imperator Alexander III and the Krasnoyarsk. The former is capable of carrying up to 16 of Russia's Bulava intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, giving it the ability to launch heavy attacks from deep waters onto US territory.
So, my friends, but I have a question for all of you guys, and like I said, I have a lot of vets that are so knowledgeable when it comes to this type of stuff. Do you guys think it's easier to send nuclear stuff with a submarine or a B-2 bomber? Because you guys have a bunch of B-2 bombers, so maybe because of that you guys don't care about submarines that much? You know what I'm trying to say? But I don't know, in water can also be difficult to track.
Putin has been bullish about his subs too, having said in December that he'll be commissioning more nuclear submarines in the future to ensure Russia's security for decades to come. Of course, the US is no slouch in the nuclear submarine department.
No.
All four of its main operation classes of subs, the Virginia, Ohio, Los Angeles, and Seawolf, are all new.
Wait, what? They have names of states? No, this one does not. This is a city. Okay, is Seawolf a city also? Ohio, Virginia? I love those states. I also love California.
Nuclear powered. And in the case of the Ohio class, the US has 14 submarines that are capable of launching ICBMs of their own, according to the Nuclear Threat Initiative. So a naval battle between Russia and the US might come down to where that battle takes place. Deep sea battles seem to favor the US, where more coastal conflicts may be the domain of Russia. Still, the US might have a slight advantage here, simply because it has more aircraft carriers, creating the possibility of better cooperation between its Navy and Air Force. But none of that matters if either country runs out of arms. Assuming the battle between the US and Russia becomes a war of attrition, which is likely, barring one potential outcome that we'll get to in a moment, keeping
that scenario will be nuclear, right? Probably. But in a war of attrition, I'm gonna go with America.
Troops stocked up will be essential. Every destroyed vehicle, sunken ship, and destroyed fighter plane will take its toll, with near constant military production likely being essential. Not to mention all the ammunition and small arms that would be needed for ground combat. Right now, the US stands apart in the arms production race, at least in terms of producing weapons for other countries. According to Axiom, the US produced 40% of the world's arms exports between 2018 and 2022, in addition to keeping its own military well stocked. That's leagues ahead of Russia. Though still in second place, it only accounted for 16% of exports during the same period. Of course, the caveat to these figures is that Russia is engaged in a war with Ukraine right now. It's not selling as many weapons because its own forces need them to fight that war, so it's no shock that the US has leaped further ahead. But further is the key term here. Even before the war in Ukraine, the United States sold and produced more weapons. Between 2013 and 17, the US accounted for 33% of all weapons exports, with Russia hitting 22%. Closer for sure, but there was still a considerable gap there. It's an inexact measure of production capacity. And it's not like Russia doesn't have the ability to ramp up when it needs to. As recently as September 2023, Reuters reported that Putin has ordered a cranking up of production to keep Russian troops well equipped, even in the face of increasingly strict sanctions being placed on Moscow. According to Bekan Ozdoev, who is the industrial director of Rostec, which manufactures most of the country's weapons, production of various types of weapons has increased to between 2 and 10 times previous numbers. He also pointed to increased production of tanks, rocket launchers, artillery, and ballistic missiles.
See, I was talking about this. They are in full war mode, you know. This is, again, good in one sense, that if they are more prepared.
All of which should be harder to produce given the sanctions placed on Rostec. Even the United States Treasury recognizes how important Rostec is to Russia, dubbing it the cornerstone of Russia's defense, industrial, technological, and manufacturing sectors. With Rostec firing on all cylinders, Russia would be able to keep pumping out weapons simply because it's a state-controlled corporation that Moscow ultimately controls. The US doesn't have that luxury. Its weapons come from private companies that are under government contracts. If Russia were to really fire on all cylinders with its weapon production, could the US match it? Or would it get wrapped up in bureaucratic red tape and contract negotiations that could delay its weapons production? It's hard to say, but ultimately the production lines won't.
And that was a good point, my friends. Because in Russia, Putin does one thing and they all do it. And maybe there is quite more bureaucracy, that's a difficult word, in America. Would you guys agree with that? Probably, right?
Matter if either country launches the biggest weapons in their arsenal, the nukes. Russia and the US lead the way in nuclear weapons, and it's not even close. According to the Arms Control Association, ACA, Russia has an estimated 5,889 nukes to America's 5,244, giving it
Okay, my friends, I have to pause it. This is actually getting a bit more close.
Slight edge. Of those nukes, Russia has strategically deployed 1,549 of them, while the United States has 1,410 ready to go. The reality is that Russia having a slight edge in numbers here is ultimately meaningless. Both countries have more than enough nuclear weapons to destroy the other many times over, meaning mutually assured destruction would come to fruition if either was brave. Still, there is an element that might tip the balance in Russia's favor from the nuclear perspective: the RS-28 Sarmat. Dubbed the Satan II by some military experts, the Sarmat missile system entered combat duty in September 2023 and can launch nuclear warheads further than any ICBM of its kind. Its range is somewhere in the 11,000-mile region, with Moscow claiming that each missile can carry 15 warheads. Washington disputes that. It claims the number is closer to 10, but it's the range that's the really worrying part. Russia.
Okay, my friends, real question. This is actually looking a bit more close than I thought. I feel like America is still ahead. Actually, tell me in the comments, who do you guys think would win, Russia or America? Leave a like if you think it's America, because this is looking super, super interesting, you know. Man, I'm Team America, but if this happens, it's crazy.
Can launch a nuke from almost anywhere and hit the US. America doesn't have that capability. Its closest equivalent to the Sarmat, the Minuteman III, can travel up to 8,000 miles, according to the National Air and Space Museum. Impressive for sure, and far enough to reach Russia, but the ICBM is outdated compared to the Sarmat. Furthermore, the US Naval Institute reports that America has only tested the Minuteman III's range up to 6,000 miles, meaning 8,000 may be a stretch for the aging ICBM. Even the Minuteman III's intended replacement doesn't outperform the Sarmat when it comes to sheer range. The upcoming LGM-35A Sentinel isn't complete yet, so its specifications aren't public knowledge. However, Air Force technology estimates that the ICBM is expected to have a range exceeding 5,500 kilometers, which is about 3,400 miles. That's less distance than the Minuteman III and about a third of the range of the Sarmat, which would put
But it's still crazy to see how far this type of stuff can go.
the US at a nuclear disadvantage. The caveat here is that exceeding 5,500 kilometers could mean that the Sentinel could go much further. We just don't know yet. The key is that Russia can now...
Yo, isn't Elon Musk right now part of the US government or something? They should put him, working with... Because he is good at launching rockets, so he probably can figure out something that goes really... You know what I mean? The guy is trying to go to Mars. Just, focus a bit more here, make our ballistic stuff a bit better.
Now fire from land almost anywhere in the world and hit the US with a nuke. Of course, America's air and nuclear submarine options mean it could launch a counterattack at any time, potentially making the point moot. The only thing for sure is that if one country went down the nuclear route, the other wouldn't be far behind. The entire world would suffer the consequences. With nukes in play, the battle between the US and Russia could come down to which is willing to fire first. But if we take nuclear weapons out of the equation, it's clear that the US, by and large, has the advantage. It has more troops, more equipment, and a far more advanced air force that is not only tactically superior, but equipped with better aircraft. On the naval front, the battle is a little more even. Though the US has a stronger attacking force, particularly in deep waters, the smaller boats in the Russian fleet grant it more mobility in coastal areas. And so we come back to the question that kicked off this video.
What?
Could the US beat Russia on its own?
Yeah, great question.
The answer is probably yes, assuming Russia is fighting on its own as well. Bring Russia's allies into the fray and you may have a whole different story.
But America also have allies. My friends, this was actually a very interesting video, and I thought the guy made great points for Russia. But at the end of the day, if this goes down, I think it's not close. I'm Team America, baby. You know what? Leave a like if you guys think America could defeat Russia on its own. But this video made really interesting points. Not gonna lie.
What do you think? Does Moscow have tricks up its sleeve that would help it to overcome the sheer firepower that the US has available? Or
I mean, they could have, but America also have a lot of technology that we don't even know yet.
perhaps there are weaknesses in tactics or equipment that would mean the US isn't quite as strong as it appears to be? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more military analysis from military experts.
Okay. Oh, I saw this one already. Oh, friends, thank you so much for watching this with me. Really means a lot that you guys end up staying until the end. I thought this was a really interesting one. Like I said, I would love to know your perspective on this, because at the end of the day, it's an interesting topic. Of course, we all should hope for peace in the world. War, we all lose at the end of the day. But I thought it was a really interesting, let's say, simulation. The video did a great job. But tell me your perspective in the comments. I have a lot of facts. I know you guys have great knowledge. But yeah, see you guys in the next one. Bye, friends.